If you're listening to this, I need you to understand something. I am not telling this story because I want sympathy. And I am definitely not telling it because I want revenge. I'm telling it because for 12 years I believed I was the villain in someone else's tragedy. And then, on a rainy Tuesday morning in October, I found out I was never the villain. I was the insurance policy. My name is Claire Donovan. I'm 39 years old. I live in Hartford, Connecticut. I used to believe that loyalty could fix anything. I don't believe that anymore. 12 years ago, I met Ethan at a charity gala downtown. I wasn't supposed to be there. My boss had given me the ticket because his wife had the flu. I wore a navy dress that didn't quite fit and heels that hurt within 10 minutes. Ethan Walker walked up to me like he had known me forever. He wasn't the loudest man in the room. He wasn't the richest either, though later I would learn his family practically owned half the commercial real estate in Hartford. But he looked at me like I was the only person in that ballroom. And when a man looks at you like that, you forget to ask the important questions. We married 18 months later. His mother, Margaret Walker, never liked me. She never said it directly. Women like her don't need to. She would smile and say things like, "Claire, you're so grounded. Ethan has always had such elevated tastes." Or, "I suppose love really does conquer background." Background. That was her word for my middle-class upbringing. My public school education. My mother's job as a nurse. I tried to win her over. I hosted holidays. I memorized her favorite wine. I learned how to pronounce dishes I had never eaten growing up. It didn't matter. When Ethan's father died 3 years into our marriage, everything changed. Richard Walker had been the real power in that family. Quiet, observant, strategic. He liked me, not warmly, but respectfully. After his funeral, the will was read in a private conference room at the firm that had handled the Walker family estate for decades. Margaret sat upright like a queen. Ethan looked exhausted. His younger sister, Lila, stared at her phone. And then the attorney cleared his throat. Richard had placed the majority of his assets into a trust that would transfer control to Ethan. Under one condition. Ethan had to remain married to me for 10 consecutive years. If we divorced before the 10-year mark, his controlling share would be redistributed to Margaret and to Lila. I remember the silence in that room. It felt physical. Margaret's face didn't change, but her fingers tightened around her handbag. Ethan squeezed my hand. Later that night, I asked him the question I should have asked in that conference room. "Did you know?" He shook his head. "I swear to you, Claire, I had no idea." I believed him. I wanted to believe him. The first few years after that were normal. We had our daughter, Sophie, 2 years later. She has Ethan's eyes and my stubborn chin. She was the best thing that ever happened to us. Margaret became suddenly attentive once Sophie was born. She sent extravagant gifts. She insisted on weekly visits. I told myself it was just grandmotherly love. But around year 6, something shifted. Ethan began traveling more. Business expansion, he said. New projects in Boston. Meetings in New York. He became distant in small, almost invisible ways. He stopped reaching for my hand in public. He stopped asking about my day. He stopped looking at me the way he did at that gala. I told myself this is what long marriages look like. Comfort, routine, exhaustion. I ignored the late-night texts. I ignored the way he started locking his phone. I ignored the perfume I once smelled on his jacket, a scent that wasn't mine, because I knew about the trust. And somewhere deep down, a quiet, poisonous thought began to grow. What if he wasn't staying because he loved me? What if he was staying because he had to? By year 8, the argument started. Small at first, then sharper. "You're always suspicious," he would snap. "I wouldn't be if you acted like my husband." I'd fire back. Margaret stopped pretending to tolerate me. She openly criticized my parenting, my clothes, the way I hosted dinners. One night, after Sophie had gone to bed, she said something I'll never forget. "You must feel very secure, Claire." I frowned. "Excuse me?" Well, she said smoothly, you hold my son's future in your hands. That must be empowering. I felt my face go cold. I don't hold anything, I said. We're married. She tilted her head.
Yes.
Conveniently. That was the first time I truly wondered if she believed I had orchestrated everything. If she thought I had somehow manipulated Richard into writing that clause. The truth is, I hadn't even known the Walker family long enough to influence anything when that was drafted. But suspicion doesn't need truth. It just needs motive. Year 9 was the hardest. Ethan started sleeping in the guest room because of work calls. He missed Sophie's school recital. He forgot our anniversary. And one evening, I found a hotel receipt in the pocket of his suit jacket. 2 nights. In Boston. Except his assistant had told me the conference was only one. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He just stared at me like he was tired. I can't do this anymore, Claire. My chest felt hollow. Do what? This constant interrogation. The tension. The walking on eggshells. So there is someone else, I whispered. He ran a hand through his hair. It's not about someone else. That's not a no. But then he said something that stunned me. I feel trapped.
Trapped.
The word echoed in my ears for days. Trapped in a marriage that legally secured his inheritance. Trapped with a woman his mother despised. Trapped because of a dead man's condition. That night, I sat on the bathroom floor after he went to sleep. And for the first time, I thought about letting him go. Not because I wanted to, but because I loved him enough to not be his cage. The 10-year mark was 6 months away. 6 months. If I asked for a divorce now, he would lose everything. If I waited, he would be free, financially secure, and free to leave me anyway. I told myself I could survive 6 more months.
For Sophie.
For dignity. For clarity. But clarity never comes gently. It comes like a storm. 3 months before our 10th anniversary, I received a call from a woman named Rebecca Holt.
I didn't know her name then.
I just knew the voice.
Calm.
Polite. Too careful. Is this Claire Walker? Yes. I think we need to talk. About your husband. My heart didn't shatter. It went quiet. We met at a coffee shop the next afternoon. She was younger than me. Maybe 30. Elegant. Controlled. She didn't look like a villain. She looked like someone who had been crying for days. I didn't know he was married at first, she said. Of course you didn't. That's what they all say, I replied. She flinched. I'm not here to fight with you, she said softly. I'm here because I just found out why he won't leave you. There it was. The humiliation I had been bracing for. Because of the trust, she continued. I stared at her. You know about that? She nodded. He told me. He said once the 10 years are up, he'll file for divorce. That we just have to wait. The world narrowed to the space between us.
Wait.
They were waiting. For a date. For a financial milestone. For my expiration. I don't remember standing up. I don't remember leaving. I only remember sitting in my car afterward, gripping the steering wheel so hard my hands ached. 10 years. He wasn't trapped. He was counting. And I was the bridge he needed to cross. That night, I didn't confront him. I watched him from across the dinner table. The man I had built a life with. The father of my child. The man who once looked at me like I was the only person in the room. And I realized something terrifying. I didn't know him at all. I didn't confront him that night. And that might have been the most dangerous decision I ever made. Because silence doesn't just protect you. It gives you time to see. For the first time in 10 years, I stopped reacting. I started observing. Ethan moved around our house like a man carrying 2 lives in his pockets. He was careful, measured, almost gentle. Too gentle. He kissed Sophie goodnight with lingering tenderness. He asked me if I needed anything from the store. He offered to fix a cabinet hinge that had been broken for months.
Guilt.
That's what I told myself. Men who are planning to leave often become kind before they go. Like they're rehearsing forgiveness. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to throw Rebecca's words in his face. Once the 10 years are up.
But something stopped me.
It wasn't pride. It was instinct. Because if he was waiting for the 10-year mark, so was someone else. Margaret. I started thinking back. Her comments, her sharp glances, the way she would ask almost casually, "How are things between you two?" Not, "Are you happy?" Not, "Is my son treating you well?" Just, "How are things?" As if she were monitoring progress. 3 weeks later, I did something I never thought I would do. I went to see Richard Walker's old attorney.
Alone.
His name was Thomas Avery, late 60s. Crisp gray suit, eyes that missed nothing. When I called to schedule the meeting, I told him I had questions about estate clarity. He agreed. When I sat across from him, I didn't pretend. "I know about the clause," I said. He folded his hands. "Of course you do. I need to understand why it exists." He studied me carefully. Richard Walker was not a sentimental man, Claire. I know. He believed his son was impressionable. I swallowed. He worried Ethan would marry impulsively or align himself with someone who didn't value commitment. "That's ironic," I muttered. Avery didn't react. "Richard added the clause after observing your marriage for 2 years.
That startled me.
After? Yes. My pulse quickened. So, it wasn't written before we got married?
No.
The room seemed to tilt. So, he saw us together, and then added a condition tying Ethan's inheritance to staying married to me? Yes. Why? Avery paused. Because he believed you stabilized him. The words hit me harder than any insult ever had. He thought I was good for him. He thought you were the only person Ethan ever chose without calculating advantage.
I didn't know what to do with that.
Then why 10 years? I asked. Avery's gaze sharpened slightly. Because Richard believed that if a marriage could survive 10 years, it was either real or both parties had something to gain. I felt a chill. Something to gain. Yes. I leaned forward. If we had divorced before 10 years, the controlling share would go to Margaret and Lila. Correct. And after 10 years? The trust transfers permanently to Ethan, regardless of marital status. So Rebecca was right. After 10 years, he could walk away wealthy and untouched. I stood to leave, but Avery spoke again. "There is one more thing you should know." My hand froze on the strap of my bag. Richard amended the trust 6 months before his death. My heart pounded. Amended how? He added a secondary clause, which is, if evidence surfaced that the marriage was intentionally maintained under false pretenses for the sole purpose of meeting the 10-year requirement, the trust could be contested. The air left my lungs. What counts as false pretenses? Documented extramarital arrangements, financial manipulation, coercion, intent to dissolve immediately upon transfer. Rebecca's words echoed in my skull. Once the 10 years are up, he'll file. I felt like I was standing at the edge of something enormous. Who determines that evidence? I asked quietly. Avery held my gaze. The trustee. And who is that? I am. I drove home in a fog. This wasn't just an affair. This was strategy. If Ethan had promised another woman that he would divorce me immediately after securing the trust, that could qualify as bad faith. But proving intent? That was something else. When I walked into the house, Ethan was in the kitchen helping Sophie with her math homework. He looked up and smiled. For a moment, my chest betrayed me. I still loved him. That was the worst part. Not the betrayal. Not the humiliation. The love. Because love makes you hesitate. And hesitation can cost you everything. That night, after Sophie went to bed, he came into our room, not the guest room, and sat on the edge of the bed. "We need to talk," he said. My heart stuttered. About what? Us. Of course. I waited.
He looked exhausted.
I know things have been strained.
Strained.
Such a careful word. I don't want us to hate each other. Are we heading there? I asked calmly. He exhaled. I don't know. There it was again. Not clarity. Not honesty. Just fog. Are you planning to leave me after the 10-year mark?
I asked.
The silence that followed was deafening. He blinked.
Who told you that? So, he didn't deny it.
Is it true? He stood abruptly, pacing. It's complicated.
I almost laughed.
No, I said softly. It's actually very simple. He stopped moving. You've been seeing someone. He didn't answer. You told her you would divorce me once the trust transfers.
His jaw tightened.
Claire, is it true? His shoulders dropped. Yes. The word didn't feel like a knife. It felt like confirmation of something I'd been mourning for months. Do you love her? He hesitated. Yes. There are moments in life where your body decides for you. Mine went cold. So what was I? I asked quietly. His eyes filled with something, regret? Shame? You were my wife. Past tense. For 10 years. It wasn't like that in the beginning, he insisted. I loved you.
Loved.
When did that change? He didn't answer. I nodded slowly. So you were going to wait 3 more months.
Smile at me.
Sleep in this house. And then file. He dragged a hand over his face. I didn't know how to end it without destroying everything. Everything. Meaning his inheritance. Not our family. I stood up. You already destroyed everything. He looked like he wanted to argue, to defend himself. But he didn't. Instead, he said something unexpected. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. I stared at him. Enlighten me. My mother is watching everything. If we divorce before the transfer, she gets control. She will cut me out. She'll destroy me financially. So you chose to destroy me instead? That's not fair. No, I said quietly. It's very fair. He looked suddenly afraid. You're not going to try to sabotage this, are you? There it was. Not guilt.
Fear.
Fear that I might interfere. I tilted my head. Sabotage what? The transfer. I met his gaze. Why would I do that? He searched my face as if trying to calculate something. Because that's what he did best. Calculate. And in that moment, I understood something with terrifying clarity. He never married me for money. But somewhere along the way, money became the reason he stayed. And now it was the reason he was leaving. I won't sabotage anything, I said calmly. Relief flickered across his face. But I won't protect you either. He frowned. What does that mean? It means, I said softly, you better hope your other life leaves no evidence. His face went pale. That night, I didn't cry. I opened my laptop. I searched Rebecca Holt, marketing consultant,
Based in Boston. Divorced.
no children, public social media.
Clean.
But private messages? That was something else. Over the next few weeks, I did something I never imagined I was capable of. I documented
Dates. Trips.
receipts, photos, screenshots. Not because I wanted revenge, but because Richard Walker, a man who barely smiled, had left me a weapon, a clause. And if Ethan thought he could use me as a stepping stone, I needed to decide something. Did I still love him enough to let him go free? Or did I love my daughter enough to protect what was rightfully hers? Because the trust wasn't just about Ethan. Once transferred, those assets would secure Sophie's future. College, security, independence. If the trust was contested and fell back to Margaret, Sophie would be at her mercy. And Margaret did not love me, which meant she would never fully protect my child. 3 weeks before our 10th anniversary, Rebecca called me again. I can't do this, she said, her voice shaking. He keeps saying we're almost there, that it's just a little longer. I feel like I'm part of something ugly.
You are, I said.
Silence. Did he ever tell you, she whispered, that his father added a clause about bad faith? My breath caught.
No, she said. He didn't know about that.
I overheard him arguing with his mother about something similar months ago. Arguing? With Margaret? I asked.
Yes.
She said something like, you'd better not get careless. Careless. I felt the pieces shifting. Margaret knew. Not about Rebecca specifically, but about the risk. And if she suspected Ethan was planning to divorce me immediately after the transfer, she might already be preparing to contest it, which meant one thing. I wasn't the only one gathering evidence. And suddenly, this wasn't just about betrayal. It was about a war I didn't know I was standing in. The war had already started. I just hadn't realized I was one of the players. 3 weeks before our 10th anniversary, the house felt different. Too quiet, too careful. Ethan stopped mentioning Boston. He stopped staying out late. He even moved back into our bedroom full-time, as if proximity could erase suspicion. Margaret, however, became unusually present. She started dropping by unannounced. She brought Sophie expensive gifts, designer clothes, a gold bracelet engraved with her initials. Not SW, just S. Walker. Ownership disguised as affection. One afternoon, I came home early from grocery shopping and found Margaret sitting at my kitchen table with Ethan. They stopped talking when I walked in. That was my first confirmation. They weren't just monitoring the marriage. They were coordinating. "Oh, Claire," Margaret said smoothly, standing. "We were just discussing Sophie's school options." Sophie was 8. There was nothing urgent about her schooling. "I'm sure you were," I replied. Ethan wouldn't look at me. Margaret approached me, lowering her voice. "You look tired, dear." "I'm fine. Marriage can be draining, especially when it's strained." There it was again. Strained. She was planting language. Narrative. I met her gaze. "Is that what Ethan told you?" She smiled thinly. "My son tells me very little these days, but I observe." Observe. I felt something click into place. She wasn't afraid of Ethan's affair. She was waiting for it to become useful. That night, after she left, I asked Ethan directly, "Is your mother planning to contest the trust?" He froze. "Why would you ask that?" "Because she's behaving like someone preparing a case." His face hardened. "You're being paranoid." "No," I said quietly. "I'm being strategic." He stared at me, and for the first time in our entire marriage, he looked uncertain about me.
Good.
2 days later, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside were photographs, blurry but unmistakable. Ethan and Rebecca, leaving a hotel in Boston, holding hands, kissing. The date stamp in the corner showed it was taken 6 months ago. Before I knew about her, my pulse pounded. This wasn't random. Someone had hired a private investigator.
And it wasn't me.
I drove straight to Thomas Avery's office. When I placed the photos on his desk, his expression didn't change. "Margaret?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "She contacted me 2 months ago requesting clarification on the bad faith clause." 2 months ago. "She suspects Ethan intends to dissolve the marriage shortly after transfer," he continued. "And these?" I tapped the photos. Likely part of her documentation. I felt the floor shift under me. So if she proves he maintained the marriage solely to reach 10 years, the trust could be frozen pending litigation. For how long? Years. Years. Sophie would grow up in courtrooms. And if the trust is frozen? I asked. The assets remain inaccessible. To everyone? Yes. That was Margaret's leverage. If she couldn't control the trust, she would rather burn it down than let Ethan have it. And in the process, she would drag all of us with her. I sat back, trying to breathe. What happens if I initiate divorce before the 10-year mark? I asked. Avery met my eyes. The controlling share reverts to Margaret and Lila immediately. And Ethan receives a significantly reduced distribution. I closed my eyes. So here were the possible futures. If I divorce now, Margaret wins. If Ethan divorces after the transfer, Margaret contests and freezes everything. If Margaret proves bad faith, the trust is locked in litigation. There was only one scenario where Sophie was protected. The marriage had to appear genuine, not strained, not tactical, genuine, for the next 3 weeks. And Ethan had to appear committed. I opened my eyes. What would count as evidence that the marriage was real?
I asked.
Avery leaned back. Shared financial planning, public unity, absence of documented intent to separate. Intent, Rebecca's messages, Ethan's promises. Those were explosives. And Margaret likely had copies, which meant Ethan was no longer in control of his own fate. Margaret was. I drove home with a realization that made my hands shake. Ethan wasn't the architect. He was the pawn. That night, I asked him to sit down. He looked wary. I know about the private investigator, I said. He went pale. She what? Your mother hired someone. She has photographs. His hands trembled slightly.
No.
Yes. He paced the room, furious. She can't do that. She already did. He stopped and looked at me like a man realizing the ground had disappeared beneath him. She'll contest the trust, he whispered. Yes. She'll freeze everything. Yes. He ran both hands through his hair. She'll destroy me. I stood up. No, I said calmly. She'll destroy all of us. That landed. For the first time, this wasn't about his inheritance. It was about Sophie. She'll drag this through court, I continued. She'll argue bad faith. She'll present the affair as proof you maintain the marriage under false pretenses. I didn't maintain it just for the money, he insisted. Can you prove that? Silence. Because texts promising divorce, once the 10 years are up, don't look romantic in court. They look strategic. What do we do? He asked finally.
We.
That word again. I looked at him for a long time. This man had betrayed me,
Planned to leave me.
lied to my face. And yet, he was still Sophie's father. And Margaret was not a woman who lost gracefully. We make it real, I said. He frowned. What does that mean? It means, I said slowly, for the next 3 weeks, we become the marriage your father believed in. He stared at me. You want to pretend? No, I said quietly. I want to decide whether there's anything left worth saving. He swallowed. And Rebecca? I met his gaze. That's over.
Completely.
Immediately. Or I walk. He hesitated. There it was again.
Choice.
For the first time in years, he wasn't choosing between love and money. He was choosing between two futures. After a long, painful silence, he nodded. I'll end it. Tonight.
He took out his phone.
And in front of me, he called her. I listened to every word. Rebecca, I can't continue this.
Pause.
No, it's not about timing. Longer pause. It was wrong. I was wrong. Her voice was faint through the speaker, but I heard it crack. Was any of it real? She asked. He looked at me when he answered. Yes, he said quietly, but I have a family. Family. He hung up, and for the first time in months, he looked like a man who understood consequences. The next days were surreal. We went to Sophie's soccer game together. We held hands in public. We hosted a dinner with friends. We laughed. And something strange happened. Somewhere between the performance and the proximity, old memories resurfaced. The way he used to brush hair out of my face. The way we used to stay up too late talking about nothing. Love doesn't disappear in a single moment. It erodes. And erosion can sometimes be reversed. One night, after Sophie was asleep, he sat beside me on the couch. I don't know when I lost us, he said quietly. I didn't answer. I think I started resenting the clause, he continued, feeling like I didn't have a choice. You always had a choice, I said. I know that now. He looked at me. Did you ever think about leaving? Yes. Why didn't you? I hesitated. Because I loved you. Because of Sophie. Because I was afraid of starting over. All of the above, I said. He nodded slowly. I was stupid. Yes, I agreed. We both laughed softly. And in that fragile moment, I realized something Margaret had underestimated. She believed money was the strongest motivator. She was wrong. Fear is stronger. And the fear of losing Sophie's stability was stronger than Ethan's fear of losing wealth. On the morning of our 10th anniversary, we went to Thomas Avery's office together. Margaret was already there. Of course she was. Impeccably dressed.
Calm.
Controlled. She looked at us, then at our joined hands. Her expression flickered. Just slightly. The transfer documents were signed. The trust moved into Ethan's control. No objection was filed. No immediate contest. But as we stood to leave, Margaret said something that sent ice through my veins. "This isn't over." I met her gaze. "Yes," I said softly. "It is." She smiled. "We'll see." I thought the worst was behind us. I was wrong. Because 2 weeks after the transfer, Rebecca showed up at my door. Pregnant. When I opened the door and saw Rebecca standing there, pale and shaking, my first thought wasn't anger. It was inevitability.
Of course it wouldn't be that simple.
She looked smaller than I remembered, less composed. One hand rested protectively over her stomach. "I wouldn't be here if I had another option," she said. Ethan was upstairs with Sophie, helping her build a model volcano for school. The normalcy of that detail felt surreal. "How far along?" I asked quietly. 12 weeks. The math hit instantly. Before he ended it, before the anniversary, before the transfer, I stepped aside and let her in. Not because I was gracious, because I needed facts. She sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Margaret had once sat plotting narratives. "I didn't plan this," she said quickly. "I was on birth control. I didn't know until last week." "Does he know?" She shook her head. "I haven't told him yet." "Why come to me first?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Because I realized something after he ended it. He didn't choose you for love. He chose you for survival." I didn't react. "And I needed to know," she continued, "if I was about to bring a child into a war."
War.
That word again. I studied her carefully. "You think this is about money?" "I think," she said softly, "his mother will use this." And there it was. The final piece. Margaret. Rebecca wasn't stupid. She had probably replayed everything. The delays, the secrecy, the urgency about timing. "If Margaret finds out," Rebecca continued, "she'll argue that the marriage was already broken, that he maintained appearances for the transfer." "She already tried that," I said. Rebecca looked startled. "She hired a private investigator." Rebecca's face drained of color. "So she knew?" "Yes." A heavy silence settled between us. Upstairs, I heard Sophie laugh. The sound pierced something deep inside me. This wasn't about Ethan anymore. It wasn't about humiliation. It wasn't even about betrayal. It was about control. Margaret had spent decades controlling outcomes, controlling narratives, controlling her son. And if this pregnancy became public, she would weaponize it. She would argue bad faith. She would drag us into court. She would freeze the trust. And she would say she was protecting the family legacy. "I'm not asking him for money," Rebecca said suddenly. "I have my own career." "That's not what she'll say," I replied. Rebecca nodded. "I thought maybe if we handled this quietly." "Quietly how?" "I don't know." There it was. The truth. There was no quiet version of this. Because Margaret thrived on exposure, on scandal framed as morality. "I need a DNA test," I said calmly. Rebecca flinched. "Of course." "Not because I don't believe you, but because if this goes legal, proof matters." She nodded again. "And if it's his?" she whispered. I inhaled slowly. "Then we handle it strategically." When I told Ethan that night, I watched something inside him fracture. "She's pregnant," he repeated. "Yes." He sat down like someone had removed gravity. I ended it. "I know." He looked up at me. "Do you think it's mine?" "Yes." He closed his eyes. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said the one thing I wasn't expecting. "This is my fault." Not defensive, not calculating, just honest. "Yes," I said. He nodded slowly. "I won't let my mother touch this." That was the first time I believed he might actually be growing up. The DNA test confirmed it 2 weeks later. Ethan was the father. Rebecca didn't ask for a relationship. She didn't ask for marriage. She asked for stability, for clarity, and for protection from Margaret. That was when the final truth surfaced. Because when Ethan confronted his mother and told her about the pregnancy, she didn't react with shock. She reacted with satisfaction. "I wondered how long it would take," she said calmly. Ethan stared at her. "You knew." "I suspected."
How?
Margaret smiled faintly. "Because I arranged the introduction." The room went silent. "I met Rebecca at a fundraising event in Boston," she continued. "Bright girl. Ambitious. I thought she and you might connect." Ethan looked physically ill. "You set this up?" "I encouraged proximity," she corrected. "You made your own choices." The cruelty of it was surgical. She hadn't forced him. She had simply placed temptation in his path. And waited. "You wanted evidence," Ethan whispered. "I wanted insurance," she replied coolly. "In case you decided to defy the family." Insurance. The word echoed. I wasn't the insurance policy. Rebecca was. Margaret had never trusted the 10-year clause alone. She needed leverage. Something explosive enough to freeze the trust if Ethan ever stepped out of line. An affair. A pregnancy. Public scandal. She had been building a case long before I knew a war existed. "You manipulated all of us," Ethan said. Margaret stood. "I protected what your father built." "No," I said quietly from the doorway. She turned, startled to see me there. "You tried to own it." For the first time, Margaret looked uncertain. "The trust is already transferred." I continued. "You can contest it, but you'll expose your own orchestration." Her eyes narrowed. "You have no proof." I stepped forward. "Actually, we do." Because Rebecca, shaken and furious after learning the truth, had remembered something. Emails from Margaret. Casual invitations to events. Introductions. Subtle nudges. Nothing explicit, but enough to establish intent. And Thomas Avery, meticulous, observant Thomas Avery, had been quietly watching Margaret for years. He knew her patterns. He knew her appetite for control. If she filed litigation, discovery would open everything, including her role in engineering the evidence she planned to use. Margaret realized it at the same time we did.
Court would not be her playground this time.
It would be exposure. And legacy matters to women like her. She straightened her jacket. "You're making a mistake," she said coldly. "No," Ethan replied. "You did." Margaret never filed the contest. Publicly, she maintained dignity. Privately, she withdrew. Minimal contact. Strategic silence. The trust remained intact. Ethan structured a separate fund for Rebecca's child. Transparent. Legal. Documented. Not hidden. Not secret. Sophie knows she has a half-brother now. Children adapt faster than adults. Rebecca moved back to Boston, but not in secrecy. And me? People always ask what I did next. Did I divorce him? Did I stay? The answer isn't dramatic. We went to therapy. Real therapy. Not performance. Not proximity staged for optics. And somewhere between anger and accountability, something unexpected happened. He chose me, not because of a clause, not because of fear, not because of money, because for the first time in his life, he saw what manipulation actually cost. Love is different when it's chosen freely. It's quieter, stronger, less romantic, more deliberate. 2 years later, I can say this without bitterness. Margaret believed control was power. Richard believed structure was protection. Ethan believed freedom was escape. But I learned something else. The real power isn't in money, or leverage, or inheritance. It's in clarity, in knowing when you're being used, and deciding whether you'll remain a pawn or become a player. I was never the villain. I was never the insurance policy. I was the variable no one calculated correctly. And that changed everything.